Hello and welcome back to another episode of Addicted to Business. Today I am joined by the man himself, Stephen Barmer-Walters, founder of 8 Retail Consultant. Thank you for joining us, Stephen.
Hello guys, thank you for having me.
And I'd also like to introduce the man himself again, Nathan Lomax, because I always forget to introduce you, Nathan, but today I'm giving you a special introduction. Thank you, Nathan.
That's very kind of you to remember. Thank you very
much. Stephen, you have worked for some big local brands and have achieved some amazing things. But before we dive into communication and telling us a little bit about your brand, I want you to tell us your story and how you first started.
Wow, I'm getting a bit worried when people start asking me that question these days. I turn 50 next month, and that's
50. No, you're not.
I like to say, yeah, that's cute for you to say. You don't look 50. Yeah,
I did. Literally right on cue. I was like,
yeah,
you don't look 50.
Well done. Text in the post, and it's unbelievable when you just think back to that length of time. I actually started work on the 2nd of June, 1986. So my 34th year, which is incredible. And really, my journey from start to where I am right now has always been about motivating and inspiring others to do the best they can do, in a nutshell. And that's taken me all around the world. It's taken me into various different industries, from sport to high street fashion, to stationery, to wholesaling, to manufacturing, to recruitment, and now finally on to consulting. And what's really interesting is nothing's really changed. And I don't mean that in a derogatory way. What I mean that by saying is the things that were key 34 years ago are still the same things today that are key. And my journey just keeps going and going and going. And I think every sort of half a decade, guys, I kind of reinvent myself again. And then I go again. And it has been an amazing journey. And sometimes I use the word luck, and I think that's a bit lame to use the word luck. I just think I've worked hard, but more importantly, I've built relationships that have stood the test of time. And I'll just give you a little example of that. My first job, my first boss when I was 16 years old is my best friend still today. And, you know, how many people can actually say that the first person I gave them the job, 34 years on, that person is still in their life. And that says a lot about who I am and my journey. And it's been a great journey. It's been a blast.
So I'm really keen to, really humbled to have you on the show, but actually really keen to dive in with all those 30 odd years of knowledge, well, nearly 50 years of knowledge. It would be great to find out more about what you think this new norm is going to look like. I'm trying to think essentially how we can make sure that those listening and watching to this episode, of course, it's not the same as if we were face to face, but I believe there's lots you can share around what this new norm will look like. Everyone's trying to do this Zoom thing and we're trying to replace face-to-face communication. But to me, there's no substitute to face-to-face. It's nice on Zoom, don't get me wrong, but it's just not the same. What are your thoughts on that? How do we deal with this new norm and what do you think that looks like?
That's such a great question, Nathan. It takes me back to the start of the noughties. I remember 20 years ago, everyone was going, oh my God, the internet, it will never take off. It'll never be successful. We'll never be able to make any money out of it. The dot-com area is just crazy. It will never work. And I remember sat there thinking, no, it will work. It won't replace how we do things. So what will happen is there will be a mixture. And I think the new norm, Nathan, is going to be called what I call channels. The new norm is going to be, it depends on what you're trying to do. It depends on your audience. It depends on what the outcome you're looking for, what channel you use. So video will be a great way to communicate sometimes, and we'll need to do that. We'll still need to do the face-to-face, but that face-to-face will look different. That face-to-face, Nathan, may be a little bit like more distant in a room, but we'll still need to do that. My fear is people believe that this will become the new norm. Sure. This is not going to be the new norm. What it's going to be is a mixture. It's going to be around, depending on what you're trying to do, depending on the audience, depending on what the outcome will look like, you will need to change that. Because, you know, one of the things I keep saying to people when I'm talking to them is that and I know you've been a great advocate of this, Nathan, is we've been talking for quite a long time about culture, and we've been talking a long time about how we express ourselves, and talking a long time about how we really get to the nitty-gritty of some conversations. What the new norm has been able to do in COVID-19 is been able to cut through a lot of the bullshit. And what's actually happened is people have been a lot more real and a lot more true, a lot quicker. We always get there, but sometimes there's too much rubbish beforehand and then we get there. I think what's happening at the moment is we're getting a lot to where we need to get to quicker because people have been a lot more open and honest.
Good shout. Good shout. I just, yeah, I'm trying to hold it together with the breakup. All I can say is that if this isn't the new norm, then that's a massive relief, right? Because I don't know about you, Stokely, but certainly for myself and the meetings we've been having, they've been good, but I'm starting to miss it now. We need to get back to some kind of face-to-face interaction. Like you say, Zoom will have its place, but hopefully it's not the only place.
No, you're absolutely right, Nathan. And there's no substitute for face-to-face. There's no substitute for that contact, that warm embrace, that heartfelt words, look into someone's eyes. You'll never be able to replace that. But what we will be able to do, just like the .com area, is use this as a channel to be able to communicate and get the message across.
Sure.
I think, yeah, like you said, Stephen, it's pretty evident that the way we communicate nowadays is completely changing and will most likely have a lasting effect. And like you said, hopefully it's not this and only this, because I don't know about you guys, but looking at a screen, back-to-back meetings every single day is tiring on my eyes and can be very.
You're such a little princess. All little eyes.
it can be really exhausting, and we're all similar types of people. We all thrive off other people and seeing people's communication and actual body language is so key to understanding what someone's trying to tell you or how they're trying to say it to you. So Stephen, what I'm trying to ask you is, for anyone who's new to this or who's trying to communicate in their best way, what are the top 5 things for them to get right on in how they can communicate better?
Yeah, it doesn't really matter what medium you're using, and I've always stuck to these principles. And the first one is, there's a reason why we have 2 ears and 1 mouth, and that is because we need to listen more than we actually what we're communicating, and listen to what the person's saying, and have those nice pauses. The other thing, don't be afraid of silence, because sometimes just collecting your thoughts for a second or so can actually make communication stronger. The other thing, which I know Nathan does a lot, don't be afraid to ask the tough questions. Sometimes we communicate poorly because we're thinking of things in our mind. We don't want to say it because we're not sure on the response. We're not sure whether that question is going to work. We're not sure whether that's going to hit a little bit too hard or a bit too close to the nerve. Ask the tough questions, because that will improve communication. Be more open. I'm hoping that the one thing that's come through these challenging times is people are starting to be more open. And what I mean by that, if you're talking to somebody in your kitchen or in your living room versus your office, they get a different version of you. And I've been talking about this for the last decade. Bring the real version of you 24/7. Because that version is the version that people will be more keen to warm towards. And I think one of the positive things that's come out of this whole time frame is, when I'm talking to people now, you get in the real them, not this person that they've been sort of practicing on in the mirror, and then they go to work and they're different. You get in the real person. So be more open. And then this thing about being relaxed, I often say to people, there's many years when I was doing recruitment in the Middle East, and I used to say to people, I want the relaxed you, because that's the person that I want in the office on a Monday morning to work for me. So how do I get to that person? And unfortunately, you can't always do that in an interview, in an hour or 2 hour interview. And that's one of the reasons in the early noughties, I introduced things like sessions and outward bound, or I'd throw a toy on the floor and go, what would you do with that? I remember this interview once with a regional manager. I was the director at Early Learning Centre. Then the regional manager a guy came for a regional manager's job, looking after a £50 million turnover region. I threw a musical stepping stone on the floor in the middle of the interview, and he looked at it and he didn't know what to do with it. Sadly, he didn't get the job. And that was because this was a toy business that was about enriching the lives of children. If I throw that on the floor and that's what you really want to do, you go and step on it. And I think that just says a lot about, you know, when you're communicating, be the version of yourself and be relaxed.
That's a great shout. I really like that story. And actually, one of the things you just said there about asking the tough questions, like I said, I do sometimes thrive on that. And so I'm going to dive straight in with a tough question, which I'm sure a lot of people want to ask. 35 years ago, you had your first job, and he's still your best friend today. What are the common mistakes that you see people make when it comes to building long-term relationships? Because there's got to be a formula that means you're successful and the others aren't. So what is that formula?
I would say one of the biggest downfalls is we're too quick sometimes to ask the question, how do I get to the top? And what happens is people are blinded by cash and profit. I've seen it through my whole career. One of the reasons, we'll go on later because, you know, when we talk about the 8 pillars, one of the things about the 8 pillars and the way my mind works and the way I've always worked in business, profit and cash is the last thing, because I believe it's a byproduct of doing lots of other things beforehand. And I think what tends to happen, someone starts a business. I was having a conversation with somebody yesterday, starting up a new business. And the first question was, how do I make the money? And I kind of said, that shouldn't be your first question. Your first question is, who's going to be my audience?
Yeah.
How do I service them? And I think one of the biggest pitfalls, I think, in careers is sometimes we're so caught up on where do we need to get to and how do we need to get to that pinnacle point. It takes years. I'm sat here with 34 years of experience. I'm still learning. I have a fantastic toolkit, but I'm still learning. I'm still trying to get to wherever it is that I'm trying to get to. And that's 34 years on. And in the beginning, all I thought about, and this is really honest and true, I remember I walked to work for the first year of my life because I couldn't afford to catch the train line. So I walked 25 minutes there, 25 minutes back as a 16-year-old because it meant I could save some more money. And I remember that those walks home, I thought about lots of things, and the word that always comes back and back is the word humble. And the reason that word keeps coming back is because everyone has to start somewhere, and sometimes we forget that, where we start from. And everyone's on that starting block, and everybody needs help and support on that starting block in the beginning. But if we're focused on the end, 34 years ago, I was focusing on the end at that point, I'd never have got to where I've got to in this day and age. My first posting at 18 was in Hull, which was, 110, 15 miles away from where I was brought up. It was a community that was all white community. I was brought up in a cosmopolitan environment in Nottingham. All my staff were 3 times my own age, all white, very, very different to me. If all I was thinking about was how much money I'm going to make and how I'm going to get to the top and what I've got to, what I was thinking about was how can I be the best version of myself, and how do I bring people into that on that journey?
That's super interesting, Stephen. And talking about people, a huge success of our business has been surrounding ourselves with the right people. And I think you can definitely build your connections up and have loads and loads and loads of connections, but you don't necessarily want to work with a bad egg or come across one. So how we all know it's super important to surround yourself with the right people, but when you're first starting out, how do you know that you are building the right connections and that you're working with the right people? How do you know that?
I don't think you do, Stokely, to be honest, is the honest answer. I think in the beginning, I think you cast your net when you're young and you take all comers.
Yeah.
It's not until you mature and you get a little bit more experience that what you then start to realize is there's certain types of people that connect with you and get those fibers going. And as you mature, you then realize there's certain types of people that don't bring out the best in you, or certain types of people that you can't get the best information from, even though they may be hugely successful, even though they may have huge businesses, even though they may have massive and amazing networks, you just might not gel with them. And you mustn't beat yourself up for that, because sometimes it just doesn't work. I'm a great believer, if you're building teams, that once you know your personality traits, you can align yourself with the people that bring the best out of you, and you can bring the best out of them. just because someone's successful doesn't mean that you're going to have a great connection, a great working relationship, because it doesn't work like that. It really doesn't. I have crossed paths in my career with some amazing people that I just couldn't work with them. They didn't bring the best out of me at all. And it just didn't work. But they were super, super good at what they did. And you just need to accept that sometimes you're going to get it wrong. And sometimes you're going to get it right. But hold on to those beliefs. Keep being who you need to be. And, you know, the right people will eventually land yourself. I mean, Nathan does a great thing. When he meets people, he always works really hard on trying to connect them with five new people. But I'm sure when he does that, he's thinking, right, who are the 5 people that actually will make a difference to this individual? Yeah. You could pick hundreds of people out of your connections, but you try and pick 5 that you think, hold on, I see this person's personality. I see where they're coming from. I see the industry they're in. I see the way they think. Right, I think these 5 people are going to be the right people to connect with, because I think these 5 people are going to get the best out of it. And that's not trying to be elitist. That's not trying to segregate people. That's just being upfront and honest. Because guess what, guys? Time does not stop. We can't control the clock. So we've got to make the best of the time that we've got. And sometimes that means cutting through the rubbish. And if there's one thing that's come out of this whole period at the moment, I think the people that waste time are being found out very quickly, very quickly. Because I also believe that our patience, because we're in this cocoon, is a lot less charitable, should I say, than it would be when you're in the outside world, taking action every day, walking, doing the things that you can do normally.
Stephen, I think one thing that really sticks out to me is ever since I met you, I really respected the honesty and transparency. And maybe that word humble is the perfect word to describe you, right? In terms of everything you say and do and the way you conduct yourself has always followed that. I'm thinking in terms of the shoes of the listener and thinking, actually, we're getting great insight, but I want to know when this guy hasn't got it right. So can you think back to any times in those 35 years where things haven't gone to plan and you go, hands up, like, I've got it wrong? Because I think we can learn so much from the stuff you're sharing, but also some of the stuff where you just didn't get it right.
Okay, yeah. Well, I'm smiling right now because I'm going to tell a story that I've told many times before. And actually, it's a great story because it's happened for me at the right time. So got my first post in, it was in 88, I think it was around November time. I'd just been doing a relief role in York. So I was the relief deputy manager of a massive Saxon shoe store in York. The area manager said, you did a great job on your relief. So what we're going to do, we're going to promote you. You're going to get your first management role. It's going to be Hull. You're going to be the manager. You need to leave home, etc. Thought fantastic. I remember I bought an amazing grey suit, had a matching tie and hanky. I thought I looked the dog's bollocks. I got to my store, walked through the door and introduced myself to all my members of staff. They all looked a bit shy, you know, like they do the meeting for the first time, a bit reserved. Introduced myself to them all, said, right, now let's get down to business. I want to increase this store turnover by X. I want to do X, Y, Z, etc., etc. I could see the looks on their faces thinking, who is this young upstart? Who does he think he is talking to us this way? But they kind of let it go. I got a memo from head office that day. We had to put our sale on. I don't know if you can think back to the 80s when you had a sale. You literally plastered the outside of your windows with posters. All the shoe stock had to come out onto rails. It was a really big operation, massive. It would take, a good couple of days to get it organised. Anyway, because I'd been rude to my staff and a bit cocky, they thought, we'll teach them a lesson. They all went home. So I had to put on posters on the outside of the window, go up step ladders, poster the window with the posters, stick all the stickers in the shoes, put them onto racks, etc. I was there till 5 a.m. in the morning. Managed to have a shave, have a bit of a spruce up, had the same clothes on when they arrived on the Saturday morning, busiest trading day of the week. And they looked at me and went, have you learnt your lesson? And I said, yes. And they said, what lesson have you learned? I said, never treat people how I don't want to treat myself, and always, remember where people have come from, but more importantly, that they're there to help me. I'm nothing without them. And they taught me that lesson. And Nora, who was my chief cashier at the time, she was the instigator of it all. And I learned a very valuable lesson at a very early part of my career, that really sticks in my head now. And I always think about that. how you deliver a speech to someone, and how you speak to them, how you talk to them, how you communicate, is so crucial. And regardless of whether someone, whatever job they do, you treat them in the right way. It was a big lesson to learn, and I smiled because it was a great lesson. It was an absolutely great lesson, and they were brave. They were so brave. And that year, guys, so 12 months had passed. I won the Manager of the Year award, and all my staff got to go to this amazing event in Leeds at the time. And, you know, I did it with them. And this is when I said at the beginning, my career has always been about how you motivate and inspire others to complete the objective. It's not about what you do when you were a manager. It's about how you inspire others to do that. And that's something that's really stuck with me throughout my career. The difference between me and the next person stood next to me is I can get done much quicker what they can do because of the engagement and the inspiration I give people to be able to deliver.
Mm. And I'm sure you've brought that lesson into great story, by the way. I'm sure you've brought that lesson into all your other businesses, including a retail consulting. And I'm sure that lesson has played a part in the reason why you're called number 8 too. I mean, for all the listeners who are listening now and taking value from you, Stephen, I mean, I know the answer to this, but why number 8, and what does it mean?
There's lots of stories to this number 8, and
okay.
And it's not until you sit there and you really think about this. 8's been prevalent in my life since I was 8 years old, right. Which is nuts. It's absolutely nuts. So when I was 8 years old, an incident happened in my life where my mum woke me and my sister up in the middle of the night, and she walked out of her marital home and took us to a hostel. And we arrived at this hostel, and they had a room for us. So there's a room that we lived in. And in the middle of the night, I woke up because we had a shared toilet. And I went to the toilet, looked down into the urinal, and I was taking a wee. And I was watching, after I flushed the toilet, and I was watching the water go as it circled round and went down. And I remember saying to myself, there's got to be more to life than this. And whatever it is, I'm going to, every day, going to work really hard and put my head above the pit and be something different. I'm not going to be a statistic based on what's now happening. And I made that decision when I was 8. So the number 8 has always resonated with me. I was 8 when I met my dad for the first time, that I didn't know he existed because I was adopted. And when I devised my business and I thought about how I delivered things over my career, there was 8 key things I always did over and over and over again without even thinking about them. And the 8 is really, it's a process, it's a journey that starts with people and ends with profit. And it's about doing some really good fundamentals right, and the profit becomes a byproduct. But it starts with the people. And this number 8 has always been with me. It's the affinity sign, I know. But it's something that's always been there. And, you know, I've always strived and pushed and worked with these 8 principles. And the first one is always people. And I always say to people and business owners, management teams, board of directors, I always say, you are nothing on your own. Stokely, you are nothing without your partner in crime. Nathan, you're nothing without your amazing team behind you. You know, we are only as good as the weakest person in our team. So what are you doing to make sure that weakest person is your strongest person? And it always goes back to that, and it never changes for me. And I know it's a weird way of looking at it, that actually you're striving for success, but you're doing lots of things here to get the success. You're not necessarily going, I want success.
That's so interesting, Stephen. What are the 8 pillars? I'm interested.
So the first one is people.
Yeah.
And the rest can go in whatever order as long as you end with profit. We've got presentation. Okay. Presentation is all about everything. It's our senses, so everything we smell, everything we see, everything we hear, everything that we take in. We've got planning. Planning for me is so important because it's about having a pathway and a critical path. It's about what are the key things that we need to do to get right. When you're communicating, you guys did research on me to be able to do this podcast. I did research on you guys to understand what you guys are all about. If you don't do that planning and preparation before, you often fail. Product. So product is all about what is the product? What is the cost of that product? What is the margin of that product? How can you bring that product to life? What's the quality? So product is there. I don't like the word marketing, and very early in my career, I changed the word marketing to promotions. And the reason being, no marketing can be done in vain. It has to be a reason why you're doing it. And if you call it promotions, what it does, it makes you think about what you want to achieve before you spend that money. It's a different way of looking at it. So we call it promotions. We've then got Place, which was very small when I started the 8 pillars, which have become huge. So Place is about the place in which you reside in the world. So it's about social media. It's about digital era. It's about all the things. It's all about new ideas. It's about all the things that position you where you need to be as a business or an individual, and then profit, which holds it all up in terms of if you concentrate on those small chunks, get them right, you then generate the profit.
So, Stephen, those 8 principles you've employed in businesses across the UK, some massive, massive companies, some much smaller companies. Are there any particular traits or pitfalls that you see businesses falling in time and time again, where you go, it doesn't matter if I'm dealing with big football club over here or tiny high street retailer over here, they both have the same problem?
Yeah. 2 areas always come to light every single time. One is around the people side. So what you tend to find is the investment in people and their development is always the one that's lacking. And Nathan, I've been in this game for so many years, and it's always the same. It astounds me. Even the one-man band, that's the one person on their own, you still have to invest in yourself. You still have to invest in yourself to be able to deliver. You still need to give yourself the right kind of time out. You still need to treat yourself in the right way. So the investment in people to develop them, to nurture them, to motivate them, to inspire them, always comes back to that. And the second big one, which, it's around the margin. So it's around how do you price the product or services or whatever it is that you're giving to the end user, and how you manage that around stock, around density, around flow, around turn. So the margin piece. And those 2 bits are normal. The 2 bits I really home in on, because it's always the 2 bits that are wrong. Always 2 bits that are wrong, or the most challenging. And it always comes back. And it doesn't matter whether it's a digital company. It doesn't matter whether it's legal services. It doesn't matter whether it's accounting, whether it's front-end retailing, manufacturing. Those 2 things are always the 2 pitfalls, or the 2 areas that I always see where there's issues.
Very interesting, Stephen. And it's amazing how you've managed, how you've implemented these 8 pillars in like I said, Nathan said, from huge businesses to small businesses. It just goes to show that it can be used anywhere and with any business person or business owner or business in general.
Or person as well. What we've now been able to realise, and I know it's something that you 2 really think about, is how you invest in the person yourself. So if you look at the 8 pillars from a personal perspective, you can actually then start to align them with the individual. You are your own product. How much time do you work on planning? How much time do you work on people, your communication, how you engage with people? How much time do you work on, how you're marketed as an individual? Lots of people have this, consultants have this issue with, do I promote my name or do I promote my business? Which one do I promote? How do I go about it? And then, how do you fit as an individual into the world, into the marketplace, into your day-to-day? So you can actually look at these 8 pillars and really look at how you can develop an individual as well.
Yeah, no, it's super important. I mean, like, there's a lot of other creative businesses that, like you said, have this argument whether they go under their own name or whether they go under their business. And I don't know if there is a right or wrong, to be honest with you, in which sort of route you take. It depends on the route that you want to take, for sure. I loved hearing about your I'm hesitant to use the word failure, because maybe it was a failure talking to your staff that way and learning from that lesson. But flipping that coin on the head, what are you most proud of to date, Stephen?
Without sounding to getting too emotional, it's my 2 children, if I'm really honest, outside of business. So I think when you work with someone else and bring new life into the world, it's quite an amazing feeling. And we have a duty of care in terms of how we develop them and nurture them and they grow. In terms of business, you know, it's really simple for me. I'm so proud that I'm still here, guys, and still relevant.
Yeah.
Because one of the things that I think I've been so lucky with, you know, I moved into fashion and football quite early on in my career, and I'm 100% sure that's the reason why I've kept relevant. It's because it makes you relevant, because you have no choice, because you're surrounded by certain types of people, and those people won't allow you to slow down and won't allow you not to be relevant anymore. I'm also super proud that I haven't been scared of technology and new innovations, and I haven't been frightened of being myself. In the early parts of my career, I think I very much wanted to be a pleaser, and I think I did a lot of things to please other people. And I think you do that when you're first starting out. I think what I'm proud of is the Steve Ballmer Walters you see now is the same Steve Ballmer Walters a decade ago, 2 decades ago, and 3 decades ago. I'm still me, and I'm proud of that. And the reason why I'm proud of it, I guess, guys, is a few reasons. Obviously, when I grew up in the 70s, you know, I was a minority, and it was really hard to be heard. And it was really hard to be heard being yourself. What happened was, got heard if you were taking a mick out of yourself, or if you were trying to act a certain way. You didn't really get heard if you were being who you were and, you know, where you came from in your community. Where now I can be me, 24/7, and that is precious to me and is the biggest achievement ever, because, you know, I can talk to, you know, one of my clients in Colorado is a multi-billion-dollar app that is in 34 different languages and in, you know, nearly every country in the world. And when I talk to him, I talk to him exactly the same as I talk to Polly, who's a independent beautician in Lowestoft. I can talk to them exactly the same because I'm being me, and that is precious. I don't think you can put a price on that.
It's so true, isn't it? You never. I think that when people try not to be themselves, because business owners speak to so many people all the time, you're eventually going to get caught out. You're eventually going to get caught out lying or whatever if you're not true to yourself and if you're not, you know, who you are. Because you can't keep up with that many conversations, or, you know, if you're true to yourself, then you've got nothing to worry about. That's the way I see it, and that's what success looks like, I think, you know, and I'm sure you'll agree.
No, absolutely. You know, people often ask me the question, you know, what does success look like? And when I say better tomorrow than you are today, what does that mean? And a lot of people always associate that with cash or with turnover or with like-for-like sales. And when I actually say it's got nothing to do with that, it's actually about, you know, when you get to the end of the day, Nathan and Stokely, you know whether you've delivered or not. You know. You might not want to admit it, but you know. And I often say to people, no. I'm going to ask you the question again, and now I want you to take a little bit of time before you answer it. And you can see the look on their face, and you know that they're thinking, he's rumbled me. He's absolutely rumbled me. And, you know, I'm going to have to bring it. I'm going to have to be honest. And the reality is, you know, I would put, and this is a bold statement, but I would say in business that people are not them true selves a large proportion of the time. And I don't think that's their fault sometimes. I just think that's sometimes to do with the industry that they're in, or sometimes to do with you know, trying to impress others. I think sometimes to do with they haven't really found themselves yet. I think it's sometimes to do with, you know, wanting to take more money, you know, and you know, I see people like Nathan being themselves and being really upfront and honest about things. And sometimes that's not popular. So let's be honest here, yeah? Sometimes that's not a popular thing to do. So this is why more people don't do it. You've got some amazing motivational speakers and some great pioneers out there, but they're not necessarily loved. Everyone talks about Richard Branson now, but I can remember a time when Richard Branson wasn't loved that much, but he carried on being himself, and eventually people got used to who he was and accepted him for who he was.
Yeah.
I think that the bit I love from that is when you said about your children. So I have grown to know you more and more over the last couple of years, and actually this the snapshot I get from social media. You get some people on social, right, where everything's perfectly polished and it's the right backdrop and everything else. And yeah, that's lovely, but it's not the true you. And what I see from you when you're with your kids, it's just the most amazing thing. And it always looks like they're having such a great time. So I can absolutely buy into that. I mean, the final thing for me today and for the audience listening is really around where the opportunities lie going forwards. There's no doubt that with uncertainty comes opportunity. I'm a big believer in that. Yeah. And I know that when we come out of this pandemic, whenever it may be, I mean, the irony is we'll be releasing this in a few months' time, right? So hopefully we're long out of it by then. But essentially, the rest of 2020 and for 2021, there will be massive opportunity for brands that are prepared to put their colours on the mast, be themselves, be bold, disrupt, and say, no, I'm not going to be like the norm. I'm not going to be a sheep or a herd. I'm going to be standing for what I believe in. I think that's massively, massively important. Yeah. So for anybody listening today, where do we think the opportunities are going to be and how can they make the most of them?
Yeah, this is a question I get asked a lot and I'll answer it in exactly the same way. I think what's happened, Nathan, is the playing field has been leveled, right? So you think about this. So think about Norfolk and all the legal service companies that we have. We have a lot in Norfolk. This pandemic has made them all have to go on this back to the starting blocks. So when we get out of the other side, they're all going to be on the starting line. No one's going to have an advantage anymore. The advantage is gone. We're all going to be in the same position going forward. What's going to make the difference is a few things. One is being niche. I remember using that word where you're saying, oh, if you're a niche business, it's going to be really, really tricky because you're too different. You need to be in an environment where you're the same as everybody else. I think what's actually going to happen is the niche businesses, the businesses that are slightly different, whether that's around product, whether that's around services, will have an opportunity. Also, we've got to accept very quickly the way we used to do business is no longer prevalent. It has to be adapted and changed. So the services that we gave and the products that we had, we're going to have to adapt them and change them slightly. We're going to have to think about what are the people's needs and how we can facilitate those needs. So I'd say it's going to be about nicheness. It's going to be about how you look at your offer and change it based on what is relevant, what's relevant right now. And the other thing I would say is don't be afraid to embrace technology, because actually the businesses that are going to get a few steps ahead are the ones that are going to be able to move really fast. And there's a word that I use quite frequently now, and the word is agile. I think we're going to have to be more agile in order to take advantage of things, and also much more flexibility.
That's perfect. Stephen, just on behalf of myself and Stokely and everyone listening, I really want to thank you for giving up some time today. I don't know how everyone's found it. Certainly for me, the signal was a little bit crackly, but actually the value that we got out of this, I dare say, when everything returns to normal and we start working more with specialists rather than generalists, as you've rightly identified, hopefully we can get you back on the show and give some more value. But for now, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it. And actually just thank you so much for the stuff you're doing for the community. I see you've been supporting Lucy and the wonderful team over the Norfolk Network. I see you getting out there more and more, and every time or every corner I turn, someone's always talking positively of yourself and 8 Retail Consultancy. So thank you. And I really look forward to seeing what the future holds.
Thank you to Nathan and Stokely. It's been great talking to you. And, likewise, I think the support that you guys are giving and the platform and the stage you're giving people to talk about what they do and their passion is amazing. And, we're going to need more of that as we go forward, because it's about sharing the stories is what the future's all about. There's no us and them anymore. It's just us.